Hi, my name is Kristen Anderson, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm branch manager here at the Ashland Library, and this is our April Read This. Staff have been talking. I kind of prompted staff because I had a bumpy day yesterday and I was having a hard time getting a list put together. And I asked staff to talk about kind of genre mashups, and a conversation started that was also about cover tropes. So we're going to do a little bit of both of those things today. Um, but I think we've got some good books on this list because I work with amazing colleagues who notice things. So we're going to start with the series of covers that have water on the front, and actually, let me back up. So we've talked a couple times about covers, and like there's a couple of ones that I've kind of hammered on a lot, like the Thursday Murder Club read alike covers that are all like white with, they often have like red art on them that's like line art. And they're very intentional to look like each other, and once you know about it, you can't like unsee it. Another one of those is wartime women or women in period costumes facing away. I was looking at our catalog as I was preparing at just the front page of the books that just happened to be new, which is a random selection of books that are new, kind of just it sorts based on recency of addition to the catalog. So it doesn't even have like an algorithm for popularity or anything in it. And I could count for just there that day that were women in period costume facing away. Still very much a trend. And there are trends in publishing, and there are ways to read covers pretty easily by some of these trends, but some of them are also just prevalent design choices that seem to kind of continue. And the first one I'm going to many of the ones I'm going to talk about today are those. So these are ones, not necessarily ones where you can go like, oh, that book looks like this book, and therefore I know what I'm getting. Like with women in historical costume looking away, you are definitely getting historical fiction featuring a female protagonist. No questions asked. They're arranged. So I'm going to try and give you a little bit of a plot summary for these. Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaughey, and you'll see the cover. But this and the next handful of covers I'm going to talk about all have water that takes up like the bottom half of the book cover. Wild Dark Shore is going to be kind of a literary, environmental, beautiful language novel that came out early in the year. And so you'll probably hear more of it. She also wrote Migrations, which was kind of a lovely lyrical story of a woman following migratory bird paths. So if environmental literary fiction is your thing, this one might be your thing. The second one I'm going to talk about is The Wedding People by Alison Esbach. This book, like when I just saw the title, when I just saw the cover, did not appeal. But this is one of those books from last year that I love with my whole heart. Like just no notes. And it's not necessarily for everyone. And like, there are a couple books that are like this, like where someone can tell you like, I love this book with my whole heart. It was heartwarming. It made me feel good inside. If you start reading it, you will recognize quickly that there is a kind of a suicide plot line in it. And so be aware that that's there, but also that that's not really what the book's about. And there is no depiction in the entirety of the book of a suicide completion. So it's kind of got some stuff about suicide at the beginning, but it's not really what the book is about. And it's set at kind of a retreat against like a destiny, like a all-inclusive retreat center kind of place, and a destination wedding. And this one person who's not a part of the wedding, but who watches the wedding people from afar. And she calls them the wedding people. And it's lovely. And the next one with water is Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney. She writes taut, kind of twisty thrillers. And this is no exception to that. It's got an island setting, as you will probably guess based on the cover. And it also has another thing that people noticed as a micro trend, which is torn paper. So that line down the middle of the cover is like a tear, and you can see text through it. And so I wanted to use that as a transition point to another book that's got that torn paper on the cover in a slightly different way, called Something in the Walls by Daisy Pierce. And Something in the Walls is kind of a horror, like young girl being possessed by a witch kind of horror. These kinds of covers with the torn wallpaper, to me, make me think of a short story that many of us read coming up called Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. It's really an early feminist short story. And because I'm talking about it, I figured I'd also plug a book I just read that is J fiction. So it's children's fiction down in our children's area, but it is a book that was written and inspired by Yellow Wallpaper. And that book is called Not Quite a Ghost by Anne Ursu. And the main character moves into a new house that has this very strange wallpaper that has some similarities with that famous short story. So if you love that short story, which I know many of us did, it's something to check out. Even though it's very different, it's definitely inspired by. And so when talking about children's books, I thought I would talk about this trend in adult fiction where we have covers that are very, 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 add a couple more varies to that, difficult to assess from the cover alone, whether the intended audience is adults or teens, or maybe even children. And so I'm going to put a few of those up for you and talk about those. Often these are cozy. Often these are romance. And if the romance is spicy, which it can be, it's generally good to know whether it's for adults or teens. And so what I recommend is being aware of what section in the library you check it out from, because that will tell you, because we do shelve books based on the intended audience for which they are published. So here's a few of those. You've got The Love Simulation, which is a kind of a outer spacey themed romance, and that's by Etta Easton. I Leave It Up to You by Jinwoo Chong. And here you see a cover that is primarily sushi and could be for anyone, but this is a heartwarming story that is definitely kind of an adult romantic story. There's a series that has these kinds of covers that are hard to decode, the Finlay Donovan series, and the most recent one is Finlay Donovan Digs Her Own Grave. Some of these I pulled, again, just from looking at the catalog and the new tab on the catalog, which is the default page that you see when you see our catalog for the first time when you look at it. So if you want to go and look at that section, you will be able to see some of these cover trends, even though the books that you see are going to be 100% different in when you watch this than they were when I was preparing for this. So because we're adding new books to the collection all the time, you're still going to see some of these trends, I promise. Another one that is hard to decode whether it's what audience is for is Zero Stars Do Not Recommend by M.J. Wassmer, which is it's a book set on an island resort that's kind of Fyre Festy. It's more structured than Fyre Fest, but it's like a wealthy tech bro and everything goes wrong. And also the sun goes out. And I know that if you're watching this and you're like, well, scientifically, they couldn't still then be on a resort island if the sun goes out. I promise they deal with that in the context of the story, but it's high action because you've got this you've got this island on which people are now stranded with no light and increasingly getting cold, and they don't have adequate resources. And by the way, some of the housing in the resort is definitely structured so that there's a fancy part of the, like a more expensive part of the island and a less expensive part of the island. So there's some classism stuff going on in that one. So anyway, all of those books are interesting, but when you look at them, you can't necessarily tell whether they're going to be for adults or children. And then in the more genre mashup category, I thought I'd talk, one of the things that came up as staff were discussing on teams was kind of how Western tropes are popping up in cross-genre ways. And actually, one of the really obvious places to see this is, and this is an oldie, but Stephen King's The Gunslinger is an example of this. Like definitely uses Western tropes, definitely has horror and sci-fi going on in the context of that. So if Gunslinger is your jam, there is kind of and also the TV show Firefly. So if those things are things that you find compelling and you like, then I've got a couple of more books that you might like checking out. One of our staff recommended Red Rabbit, which is Western folk horror by Alex Grecian. I've recently read a series of books, of which the first one is called The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy, and that's by Megan Bannon. It is it's a series. It's one of those that is both romance and kind of action fantasy at the same time. And I also wanted to mention the mimicking. Why is that so hard to say? The Mimicking of Known Successes by Malka Older. And that one is a novella that's definitely in outer space and definitely Western. So more towards the Firefly side and less towards the kind of what I'm thinking of as Gunslinger as kind of being, there are other worlds than these, right? So it's kind of our world on the ground, but an alternate world versus like outer space opera stuff. And Undertaking of Heart and Mercy is more that gunslinger kind of trope. If you're not familiar with the line, there are other worlds than these, that's one of the kind of really famous lines from the Gunslinger. And there are plenty of other cover tropes that we noticed. There's paint dribbling down the front. There's a Goodreads list that has some fun mashup genres and cover trends that we might be able to share as a link with this video. Next month, I'm going to come back and talk about the most banned books of 2024, because that list is one that comes out in April during National Library Week. And so we'll have that. And other than that, like, have a great month, and thank you for listening. And I hope there's something in all of this that you will enjoy reading. Thank you.